and there are some real things that we can do that we would never think of otherwise.
Yeah.
We've got a question in our Q&A. My husband is planning on going to Seeking Integrity in the summer. Is disclosure part of that process if I cannot be there? Yeah, I'll answer that
I
one.
think that's more a question for you, Scott.
Yeah. Disclosure is definitely part of the recovery process, and maybe I'll ask Jon to talk a little bit about what disclosure is and how it works. It is a big process that involves both the cheating partner and the betrayed spouse and the therapist for both of them. It's a process. What we offer at Seeking Integrity, we break through denial. We help the addict understand what his addiction is, what it looks like, and to develop a plan for moving forward, which will include full disclosure under the guidance of therapists. So disclosure is not going to happen when he's in treatment. Interestingly enough, we're getting a lot of requests from people who want to come to treatment right now because they can't go to work. We're full. But yeah, disclosure doesn't usually happen in primary treatment, which lasts typically anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. Primarily because the addict isn't ready to give it, because he's still keeping way too many secrets. He has way too much denial. That has to be broken down. He has to get honest before he can give disclosure. And you're going to need some separation from him and some work with your therapist so you understand, I need to know this, and this. I don't want to know about that. I don't need that specific, that kind of thing. So it's a big process. And Jon, can you explain a little bit more about how therapeutic disclosure works and why it's so important to do it with a therapist?
Yeah, there's two main purposes in therapeutic disclosure. The first purpose is to put truth as the foundation of the relationship, because it hasn't been when addiction has been going on. And there's truth that comes from both sides. So the truth of the addict is, what they've been doing that they've been keeping secret, what they didn't tell you the whole truth about. The truth for the partner is your real emotional reaction to it. And all aspects of that real emotional reaction. So there's a lot of preparation for both. For the addict, like Scott just said, there's a lot of willingness to become honest, the ability to be honest, the ability to sustain honesty. I would also say an important part of preparation for the addict is the ability to sustain truth without being overwhelmed by shame. One of the last things that I want is to put a partner of an addict in a disclosure process where maybe he can tell you what happened, but his body and mind are somewhere else because he's inside trying to manage his own level of shame instead of being able to attend to you and see what the truth of this thing is for you. So that can take a little bit of time to get somebody in a place to do that. The preparation for the partner is often sorting through a myriad of really intense emotions, the ability to know what those emotions are. And I think what makes the biggest difference for the addicts that I work with is when they can see not just the anger and not just the how could you do this to me, but they can also see the immense sadness that comes with the betrayal. That I see as a really helpful door into empathy, which is one of the overall goals of disclosures. We want to build that foundation of truth and a foundation that the relationship can actually grow and thrive on. That's the purpose of disclosure, is not just getting the information out there, but ultimately being able to repair the relationship. And so there's, like Scott mentioned, the logistics of this isn't just for the addict to say, okay, here's everything that I've done. You may have specific questions because of things that you've discovered, things that you've heard, things that you've wondered about your spouse. And it's important for you to be able to work through with your therapist. Here are the questions that are essential for me to know the truth of. Some of those questions, like I said, may come from information you've gathered about your partner. Some may come from your own background. I've always assumed that everybody who uses porn also is going to be prone to abuse children. And you're going to want some clarification around that. You're going to want to know what's going on there, and you're going to want to know the truth from your partner. So your preparation is just as essential as your partner's preparation. And when disclosure is done in a therapeutic process with therapists who are trained and know how to do this and understand the purpose of it, I would say, yes, there's many aspects of disclosure that are re-traumatizing, but it's the difference between, breaking your leg and not having it set right, and you just thinking you can kind of tweak it into place and having it surgically rebroken, reset, so that it can heal properly and you can function. And that's really what therapeutic disclosure is about, is making sure that we can reset with truth as the foundation, that there can be a real emotional interchange between the couple, and we keep this foundation of honesty and truth as central to the relationship.
Yeah, I always think of disclosure as when the scale tips from mistrust and lies, it evens out. Now we know the truth, and we can, we can move forward. But yeah, the reason it, like I said, the reason it doesn't typically happen during primary treatment is because the addict is just not honest enough at that point. We're still fighting with the addict to accept reality. So there will be disclosures, obviously, that happen during treatment, but we try to control them and make sure that the betrayed partner understands this is not a full disclosure. This is just something you need to know right now because, for some reason. So yeah. Okay, another question. You mentioned empathy. Why is it difficult for the addict to show empathy? Big question there, and a good one. I can't fathom lying to someone I love the way that I've been lied to. It's hard for me to understand how anyone can lie so easily and live two lives, so to speak.
So there's a couple of things going on here, and I think I want you to understand, I don't see these as excuses. I see these as obstacles to overcome, legitimate obstacles. They're skills to learn and actual brain structures to be developed. So the parts of the brain that light up in a quote unquote neurotypical brain, not only do they not light up the way that they do with the neurotypical brain in an addicted brain, they're actually, there's some shrinkage there. There's some atrophy. We've seen this from brain scans of alcohol, drug users. I don't know if that's been done on compulsive behavior yet, like gambling or sex.
Yeah, Valerie Boone in Cambridge, UK.
That's right. I always forget it. Her studies are so good. Yeah, so there's actually a structural problem with the brain. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't resonate the way a neurotypical brain does, and I think some of that is because essentially in an addiction, a person is unplugging themselves from the social world from the reciprocal world, and they're going completely internal to regulate themselves. I refer to these people as auto-regulators. The way our brains are designed to work the best is to co-regulate with another nervous system that we're safe enough with. And a lot of addicts, especially sex and love and porn and relationship addicts, they don't have a real strong track record of safe, connected relationships. And so from a skills point, they actually emerge through their addiction almost with this inability or intolerance to the sensations of being connected to another person. So one of the reasons why it's difficult for addicts to show empathy is they don't study you close enough to know what's actually going on. They get a sense of, you're upset, this is bad, I've got to get out of it, and that's all the information they gather, rather than working to find out, okay, why are you upset? Oh, that makes a lot of sense to me. Oh, I can see you're not just upset with me, you're upset about some other things. I can come alongside you and I can help you. This isn't a threat to me. That's a skill that's learned. And with a lot of the guys in recovery that I work with early on when they struggle with empathy, a lot of what I work with them on is, did you actually understand that correctly from your spouse? Do you really understand where your partner is coming from? or are you making an assumption that this is about you when it's not? And when I'm working with couples, sometimes what I have to do is seat them across the room from each other, and I'll say to the one who's struggling with the empathy, I want you to actually look at your partner now. Tell me what their body is doing. Tell me what you see on their face. And what I find is a lot of the time, the person who's struggling with the empathy, for whatever reason, sometimes they can't name the emotion accurately, or they read everything as anger when it's not. So the good news is, when it comes to empathy, it's a skill, not an innate ability in our brains. So it can be learned, and we also know that learning impacts the structures of the brain. So as long as there's not continued use and there's a focus on learning empathy, those parts of the brain that have atrophied due to addictive or compulsive behavior, they can actually grow back. They can grow to a more normal size, but it takes a lot of practice. This is where I think qualified marriage therapy is really, really helpful, and also I would say a really attuned individual therapist for the addicted person, because that therapist won't just focus with them on getting sober, which is important. They'll also focus with them on how they're doing emotionally and how they're relating emotionally to others, which I think is a really critical part of recovery.
Yeah, and I'll just add, as an addict, I couldn't identify what I was feeling, so I certainly couldn't identify what anybody else was feeling. And it's
Yeah.
not like I wanted to hurt somebody. Addiction for me, I grew up, one parent was absent and the other was highly anxious and incredibly unpredictable. I never knew who was waiting on the other side of the door when I came home from school. I would pause at the door and take a deep breath, because I could have fun mom or crazy mom,
Yeah.
And I didn't know. So I learned, to not turn to, my caregivers, which is what a kid normally does, when I was having an emotion, to co-regulate. I just couldn't trust it. I didn't know what was going to happen. So, that's a perfect setup for addiction. I can't trust other people, so I learned to turn to a substance or a behavior, to not necessarily regulate, but to escape the feelings that were uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And, over the years, I just got really unattached from other people. And I really had no clue about, the fact that my actions might impact someone else. I was way too busy trying to keep myself safe, or at least not miserable in the moment. And that, it takes a long time to unwind that wiring and
Yep.
to rewire into, first of all, figuring out what I'm feeling, and then figuring out what you're feeling, and then connecting what I've just done to what you're feeling. I mean, it's a huge process. And, I'm sure your husband is not, he's probably semi-aware of the lies as they come out of his mouth, but not even 100% aware at this point.
Yep.
And he definitely does not mean to hurt you. I mean, I'm reading into this, but I mean, addicts, we don't want to hurt people. We want to protect ourselves, and that just overrides everything and drives us into behavior that's, in retrospect, horrible. I mean, I look in the mirror today and I think who I was 20 years ago, and I'm like, my God, was that really me?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is yes, it was just a very different version of me.
Yeah.
Next question here. I am not sure if I am a sex addict. I tried a couple of SLAA meetings in 2009. I've been in and out of AA with chronic relapses since 2009, and a little over 2 months ago, or I'm a little over 2 months sober right now, but not really attending meetings or fully committed to AA. I find myself acting out in a compulsive manner, like checking my male landlord through the bathroom window. He is straight and not interested in gay sex. I'm afraid of the consequences if I continue with this behavior. I'm living here with the condition that I should not bother him anymore. Is my problem sex addiction or what? Not sure I fit SLAA, SCA, SAA. I am also having a straight affair with a married woman and seeing myself in a bisexual way as opposed to gay. A lot of info packed in that.
Lots of things going on. And with that, I think it's important to note that out of control sexual behavior is not the only diagnostic criteria for sexual addiction. And there's a lot of things that look a lot like sexual addiction, which are not. And this is where I think qualified assessment is really helpful. One of the issues that's coming out here, and I actually somehow I'm the therapist in my area that helps gay men who struggle compulsively and struggle compulsively with sexual behavior, but also have not come to terms with their sexual identity. And I've seen that being a huge factor in compulsive behavior. So that would be worth looking at if you struggle with your identity as a sexual person at all. I think it's important to look at that area too, because what can happen is any part of us that we try to repress or try to control without understanding, what ends up happening is it really feeds the fire of that part and it comes out sideways in really compulsive ways. So for example, one of the secrets to financial management that I discovered is I have to budget money that can go to whatever I want it to, rather than having a name for every dollar. Because what I found when I was doing that kind of budgeting and financial management is I would feel deprived, and so I would spend my money on unplanned things in big ways because I was trying to deny that part of me that needed to have fun and flexibility and all of that. And so it came out in different ways. And I think in many ways, sexual identity and sexual expression is not that different. If there's a part of you that you are not square with and not accepting and being able to live openly and fully, it can manifest itself in some compulsive, boundary intruding ways. But that's not the same as sex addiction. So I think the best course for you would be to touch base with Scott or another sex and relationship healing staff and get some help finding someone qualified in your area that can help you see all the moving pieces and to know what's going on. When I see folks with issues that are not related to sex addiction going into sex addiction recovery and trying to solve it that way, it tends to increase shame, which tends to intensify behavior. So good assessment here, I think, is the place to start for you. So you make sure that you're really getting the help that fits the primary problem.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Dr. Rob has written 100 times in 100 different places, being gay, lesbian, or bisexual has nothing to do with sex addiction.
Yep.
It's completely unrelated. There may be a whole set of issues that you might want some therapy with in terms of coming to terms, but they are not per se sex addiction. That said, gay people can be sex addicts just like straight people and bi people can be sex addicts.
We all have that in common.
Yeah, we can all be sex addicts, but just because I'm gay or bisexual, being gay doesn't make me a sex addict any more than being straight would make me a sex addict.
Yep.
What makes me a sex addict is preoccupation to the point of obsession with sex, loss of control over sex, generally evidenced by failed attempts to quit or cut back. If I've tried to quit and failed and tried to quit and failed and tried to quit, I may have a problem. And then some consequences, whether they're emotional, like shame and depression, or more overt, like getting arrested, or financial consequences of getting thrown out of, a relationship or whatever. But those are the three basic criteria. If you qualify with those criteria, if you identify with those criteria, you may have a problem.
And I would also add to that, like any other diagnostic criteria, there's always this caveat. It also can be explained by anything else. So like I've had clients before where their sexual compulsivity issues went from day to night when another psychiatric condition was identified and they were treated for that.
Often the manic stage of bipolar, people look sex addicted.
Yep.
That's a big one.
Yep.
So, there's a screening test on seekingintegrity.com, and I think there's a screening test on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. I'll post the link in the chat feature here real quick. It's like a 20-question screening test similar to what AA has.
Yep.
I will dig that up in a second and post it in the chat feature.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I'll do it right now. So I'm going to let Jon talk for a second while I, while I go search.
With anything that folks are going through, I think there's a big tendency to attach yourself to the first label you come across that seems like it explains. And I'm so glad that especially around sexual issues, there's a whole lot more that's being said publicly and a whole lot more that's being written and put out there, and so many resources that people can connect to. However, I have yet to work with a sex addicted individual that did not have something additionally or more complex going on. And so, finding things like SLIA and SCA and SAA and even Seeking Recovery and things like that is a helpful place to start. But if what you are doing there doesn't seem to be fitting and solving your problem, you might need to pull back and redefine or get a larger view of what the issue might be. And that's where qualified assessment is so helpful. Many of the sex addicted clients that I work with, the critical place to start is not necessarily in getting sober. Sometimes it's in getting stable in other issues. And then sobriety is a whole different issue. And it feels very different to them once they're stable in other critical issues. So check out those resources, and I would definitely recommend getting some good assessment.
Yeah, and if you're worried about sex addiction, I would look for somebody with CSAT, Certified Sex Addiction Therapist, as part of their designation after their name. Just because they're the ones, they're trained to look for sex addiction, and they're trained to look for not sex addiction, which would be other issues that might look like, they know the difference and what sex addiction really is and what it really isn't, which is, as Jon mentioned earlier, is just as important. Because if you're not a sex addict and you're getting treated for sex addiction, it's not going to help. It's like treating somebody for cancer when they've got some other disease, or vice versa. It's just not going to happen. Next question: who is Scott? I'm Scott. Sorry, hi. I assume you just I don't know what else to say to that. If you're contacting Seeking Integrity, we have a contact us page on the seekingintegrity.com website and sexandrelationshiphealing.com. That usually goes to Tammy Verhelst, who's our kind of outreach person. So anybody who needs referrals for therapists and things like that, you're going to end up talking more to Tammy than me. But if you happen to get a hold of me, sometimes I fill in for her. We're the people that help you find somebody in your area. We're going to be doing some online stuff starting probably pretty soon. But even that is going to be an attempt to just do a quick consult and then point you toward, a plan that's local for you. Chat feature. Thank you for the link. Okay. Send us some questions. We're out of questions. I wanted to go back. I did have some questions for you. One of them was about introverts versus extroverts. And I know that's seemingly off topic, but I want to go back to your original topic about sort of dealing with the pandemic. Do introverts have an easier time than extroverts dealing with something like this?
So I'll start with my favorite author on the subject of introversion and extroversion, named Suzanne Cain. The book that she wrote is The Power of Introverts.
Great book.
Quiet the Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And what she points out there is that introverts need people just as much as extroverts do. They just do it in different ways. So, an extrovert gets recharged by going to a party and talking with 20 different people and being out there. An introvert will get recharged by having a quiet moment, either by themselves or with one or two people that they deeply connect with. There is a common thread, though. Like I said, both introverts and extroverts need people. It just looks different. So I'm an introvert in a very extroverted family, and right now we have with my 5 siblings and all of their kids and my parents, we have a giant Marco Polo going every day. I am overwhelmed with the volume of messages. Last night they wanted to do this Disney Plus watch party thing where it syncs in all of our browsers and we watch the movie at the same time, and we were chatting, and just the fact that every 2 minutes 10 people were chiming in with a comment on the scene, I was just kind of like, get away. That doesn't mean that I don't want to be around people. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm reaching out to friends I haven't talked with in a long time, just to check in and just to talk and just to catch up. That kind of one-on-one thing is really recharging for me, and I have to find ways to do that. Just like an extroverted person needs to figure out ways to have more of a party, or interact with lots of different people.
Yeah, I left the screen for a minute. This is the book by Susan Cain, Quiet. Highly recommend it. Obviously, I'm an introvert, which is why I have this book.
Yeah.
And, I asked that question because I have some sponsees who are serious extroverts, and they're going bananas right now.
Yeah. Yep.
Whereas I'm kind of re-energized by having some quiet time, even though I'm missing my, I work from home, but I make it a practice to get out of the house for at least an hour a day to be social, even if it's just a 12-step meeting, but usually it's a 12-step meeting and dinner, or, meeting somebody for coffee, even though I don't drink coffee. And I'm missing that, so I'm doing online stuff to connect. But my sister, the extrovert, is driving me crazy.
Yeah.
With text messages 37 times a day. She's stuck home she's on leave from work, and she's bored. and and I yeah, I get it. So LOL, my husband, extrovert, calls me antisocial because I'm an introvert, and sometimes we can look that way.
They are not the same thing, though. I'd really recommend her book. Even, when this whole taking care of yourself thing, I think diving into things that are interesting and that you're learning about that you haven't before, that can really help with self-care. And I just think that whole how people are wired natively to work, that's so interesting to me. And with introversion and extroversion, it's really related to temperament, which is an infant's native way of responding. She talks about a study in there, measuring an infant's temperament. I think they talk about reactive infants versus non-reactive infants, and that's how infants respond to stimulus. And the ones who respond by squawking and flailing, there's a high correlation with extroverted qualities and tendencies later on in life. And with infants who kind of respond with what oh, no, it's actually reversed. The infants who squawk and cry and scream, they tend to be more introverted. They're more sensitive to stimulus outside of them. And the ones that are just kind of they tend to be more extroverted because their threshold of tolerance is a lot higher for outside stimulus than the infants that are more reactive. And that's just an inborn thing. It's not necessarily something that we learn or something that we're traumatized into or out of, although that can have some kind of an impact. But a lot of it is just baseline, you came out of the womb this way and it's how you function.
Yeah. We're kind of running out of time, and we don't have any more questions. Jon, you want to just kind of recap your ways to coexist and get through this real quick, and
just as a recap, keep these in mind as some principles to live by. Whenever I'm in times of great stress, I try to find 1 to 3 principles that I'm kind of going to use as my North Star to help me make decisions and organize things. So whether it comes to your personal life, your response to things on a global level, or the relationship that you're in right now, I think it always helps to focus on doing what you can rather than what you can't. So get creative, do what you're already motivated to do. Doing what you can doesn't deplete you. it leaves you energized in some way. The second thing is to challenge yourself to stay within what's realistic, or in other words, try to let go of what you can't do, practicing active surrender, practicing wait and see. That balance between doing what I can and letting go of what I can't. Seems like I've heard a prayer somewhere that has to do with the AA Serenity prayer. Recognizing what we can encourage, or recognizing what we can't do, encourage to do the things that we can. And then the third point is just taking really good care of yourself. Focus on the basics, especially during times of prolonged stress. It's really easy to let some basic things go that make a big difference for us. So hold that lightly as well. You don't have to, hit the mark on exercise every day, or great socialization every day, but hold it lightly as a goal to work toward, so you can take good care of yourself, and we can be in a place to take good care of each other.
Awesome. Jon, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you everybody for being with us. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
Yep.
We'll be back the second week of next month.
Yep.
The second Tuesday of next month, whenever that is. So thank you everybody for being here.
Well,
and we'll see you soon.
bye.